Welcome to Storytime Fun, boys and girls. We hope you enjoy. Today's story is out of the Walt Disney's classic storybook. And today's story is called Pinocchio. Long ago, in a little village, a wood carver named Geppetto made a wooden puppet. It looked so much like a real boy that Geppetto gave the puppet a name, Pinocchio. As Geppetto happily danced around his workshop with the puppet, a tiny traveler named Jiminy Cricket slipped inside. The cricket needed a warm place to sleep that night. He watched as Geppetto set the puppet down and gazed out the window at the night sky. "I wish that my little Pinocchio might be a real boy," he said. Soon, Geppetto and Jiminy Cricket fell asleep. Before long, a shimmering light filled the workshop and woke up Jiminy Cricket. It was the Blue Fairy. She waved a magic wand over Pinocchio, and the puppet came to life. But he was not yet a real boy. The Blue Fairy explained that someday, if he was brave, truthful, and unselfish, he would become real. Then, knowing Pinocchio would need help, the Blue Fairy made Jiminy Cricket the puppet's conscience. The cricket would help him choose between right and wrong. When Geppetto awoke, he was delighted to discover that Pinocchio could walk and talk. The old man wanted to be a good father, so he sent Pinocchio to school. Along the way, Pinocchio met a fox named Honest John and a cat named Gideon. Pinocchio told them where he was going. "School?" Honest John said. "Then you haven't heard of the easy road to success. I'm speaking, my boy, of the theater." Honest John took Pinocchio to Stromboli, a man who owned a traveling puppet show. That night, Pinocchio sang and danced in Stromboli's show. The crowd cheered and threw money onto the stage. But Jiminy Cricket, who was in the audience, was worried. Later, Stromboli locked Pinocchio in a cage. "This will be your home," he said. "You will make lots of money for me." Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket were very upset. How would the puppet ever escape? Luckily, at that moment, the Blue Fairy arrived. But when she asked Pinocchio why he had missed school, he lied. His nose grew a little. Each time she asked Pinocchio a question, he lied. With each lie, his nose grew longer and longer. The Blue Fairy reminded him to always tell the truth if he wanted to become a real boy. "Oh, I will," Pinocchio promised. The Blue Fairy fixed his nose and set him free. On their way home, Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket ran into Honest John again. This time, Honest John convinced Pinocchio to go to Pleasure Island. Jiminy Cricket warned Pinocchio not to go, but the puppet just wanted to have fun. He didn't think about Geppetto or that he might get worried when Pinocchio didn't come home. On Pleasure Island, Pinocchio made friends with a boy named Lampwick. Together they explored the island. There were rides and treats, and the boys could do anything they wanted. But after a few days of having fun, Lampwick and Pinocchio sprouted ears and a tail. They were turning into donkeys. When Lampwick changed completely into a donkey, Jiminy Cricket knew that he had to get Pinocchio off the island fast. Pinocchio agreed he was ready to go home if they could find a way off the island. Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket finally escaped. But when they arrived at Geppetto's house, it was empty. Just then, a letter fell from the sky. It explained that Geppetto had gone to look for Pinocchio. When he was at sea, the woodcarver's ship had been swallowed up by a whale named Monstro. Geppetto was living in Monstro's belly. "Oh, I'm going to find him," Pinocchio said to Jiminy Cricket. Pinocchio ran until he got to the ocean. Then he jumped in. Jiminy Cricket was right behind him. The pair began to search for Geppetto. Meanwhile, in Monstro's stomach, Geppetto was fishing. The whale had been asleep for days and had not swallowed any fish, which means Geppetto had nothing to eat. Still, all the woodcarver could think of was Pinocchio. Nearby in the ocean, Pinocchio had found Monstro. As the whale awoke and swallowed a school of fish, he sucked Pinocchio into his mouth as well. Moments later, Geppetto pulled a tuna onto the deck of his ship with Pinocchio clutching his tail. "Father!" Pinocchio cried. "I'm so happy to see you," Geppetto said, hugging his son. "I came to save you," said Pinocchio. But Geppetto told him there was no escape. Nothing could get past Monstro's huge teeth. Pinocchio had an idea. They would build a huge fire with lots of smoke so that the whale would sneeze and open its mouth. As the fire grew, Pinocchio and Geppetto climbed onto a raft. Monstro's mouth opened and the whale sneezed them into the ocean. "We made it!" shouted Pinocchio. Monstro was furious. He chased after the raft and smashed into it. The raft broke into pieces, knocking Geppetto out. Pinocchio grabbed his father and swam. When Geppetto awoke, he was on the beach, but Pinocchio was nowhere in sight. Jiminy Cricket found the wooden puppet lying among the rocks. Geppetto carried his son home in his arms, convinced he had lost Pinocchio forever. Back in his workshop, Geppetto set Pinocchio on the bed, and he wept. Then the blue fairy appeared. "Awake," the blue fairy said, waving her wand. Pinocchio had proven himself to be brave, truthful, and unselfish. Pinocchio opened his eyes. He had become a real boy. "Father, I'm alive!" he shouted. "This calls for a celebration!" cried Geppetto. He and Pinocchio danced happily. Geppetto's wish had come true at last. Well, that's it for today.
We'll see you next time.